It's Tuesday night and it's 8 o'clock and this is the Bob Leonard Show. And like we tell you every week, we take the stories you've been reading about in your newspaper this week and watching on television, and we put our spin on it. We try to give you the story behind the story. What's really behind it? What's the background of that story? Is there anything that should be said that wasn't said that gives you a better perspective of what the full impact of the story is? That's what we do here. And like we tell you every week, it's only our opinion, and you can accept or reject it. But obviously, we're going to have our say. Now, this program will show at 8 o'clock tonight, which is Tuesday night. It will be repeated tomorrow night from, I think it's 11 to 12 at night. And then if you miss it either one of those nights and you want to see it, it also can be seen on your internet if you punch in flinttalk.com. The programs will come up, and I think they go back 6-7 weeks, and you pick the one you want, or if you miss this one, you can punch in and this one will play for you. And it starts right at the beginning and goes through to the end. So either place, tomorrow night or on flinttalk.com, you can pick it up. But anyway, we have a number of things we want to talk about tonight. And of course, tonight is election day, and there's been a lot of things said and done which I think has been very aggravating to the public in trying to decide, what's truthful and what isn't truthful in these campaigns, whether it's in the city of Flint, whether it's in the city of Burton. But, this week there's been a lot of things that have happened in the city of Flint that I think we should really address. We critiqued the city of Flint's mayor's primary election a couple of weeks ago, and last week the Burton mayor's election. And since that time, there's been some really wild activity engaged in by particularly the Williamsons' opponents. And it's almost outrageous what's going on here to try to mislead the public into certain things that are going on with the candidates and the positions of the candidates. Like we said last week, Williams's opponents are collectively and individually holding themselves out as kind of the second coming of Christ, and Williamson as the reincarnation of Satan himself. I said, and I've said it many times, that Williamson is an arrogant ass and often deserves a kick in the pants. However, arrogance itself doesn't mean he's done a bad job. In some cases, arrogance may cause the person to do a better job than if he was not overbearing like Williamson is at times. But anyway, what bothers me most about this new breed of politicians that are running against Williamson is their holier-than-thou attitude. Their motto is to do as I say, not as I do. And really kind of that's what's happened this last week. There was all kinds of criticism by the opponents of the mayor, and I don't know who's going to win the primary. I don't even know if the mayor will survive the primary. Everybody suggests that he will, but even if he doesn't, you should know this about the other 5 candidates, whichever 2 go into the election, because it does reflect on their character and their integrity, on what's happening here. Because the people that are opposed to Williamson, the 5 of them on the city council, keep in mind that it's not the whole city council, it's 5 of these people who are opposed to him, are all tied to these candidates who are running. Whether it's Neely, whether it's the other people that are running, they all are tied in some way, and the main objective is to do what they can to destroy the reputation of Williamson, however it is. But anyway, one of the things that happened this week, just a couple of days ago, and you may have read about it in the Journal, it says, Mayor's foes trade barbs at forum. Now here's this group who had been criticizing Williamson for not showing up at these meetings and these so-called forums or debates or whatever you call it. So this time he shows up, and it says here in the Journal, written by Chad Sawakti, Mayor Don Williamson's first appearance at a public debate quickly turned into a shouting match among supporters, opponents, and Williamson himself. Appearing with 7 other candidates for the city's top job Sunday night, Williamson didn't get far into his list of accomplishments as mayor before catcalls and barbs from his opponents led him to yell at one audience member to shut up while I'm talking. Then he says, I feel like I need to apologize for you, Williamson said to his vocal opponents. It's too bad you have to be so small. Now, you see, why he even went there, I don't know. Because from the very beginning, this was a political ambush. Any one of them he went to would have been a political ambush. All these people, these 5 candidates have their supporters there in groups, and they're both supporting and cheering for their people when they talk. But when Williamson gets on, they all come at him, and they won't even let him get whatever he has to say out. It was an ambush. And, if I was advising, I would have told him, don't go there, because it's crazy. You're not going to accomplish anything there. There was a few people that were there to, find out what the candidates are saying. And, but on the whole, it was just these groups of people who are supporters of the other 5 people who just completely disrespected whatever Williamson was going to say. So, and as I say, here's same people. It says, more mud slung at Flint Mayor as primary nears end. And here's how it reads, and this was in August 3rd. And it says this, the Flint mayoral election has taken a decidedly negative turn in the final days leading up to Tuesday's primary election. A flurry of mudslinging is aimed squarely at incumbent Mayor Don Williamson, who faces 6 challengers Tuesday, with the top 2 finishers moving on to the November general election. And this is written by Marjorie Raymer, who is the reporter who covers City Hall. She went on to say it's coming from the opponents, activists, even anonymous sources, one of whom is faking union credentials. Now, these are the people that have organized to oppose Williamson, that are fabricating union support and things like that. Here's what it went on to say. A letter being left at businesses with signs supporting Williamson. The signs are up, so these letters, these people bring these letters to these businesses, calls the mayor a lunatic and threatens a union boycott. The letter claims it is from ASME, no local 1600. That's the city, big city union, city employees union. And then it goes on to say, which is totally false, said local president Sam Muma, who said, like most other groups, the union is taking a neutral stance for the primary. The letter is being circulated along with a copy of a piece produced by local activists that encourage voters to dump the Don. Now, this letter is claiming the union support, which is false. Josh Freeman, who acknowledges he is the treasurer of the group that produced the Dump the Don piece, denied any involvement in or knowledge of the fraudulent union letter. Well, he and his people were the ones who were handing it out. Now, here's the dichotomy here. It says here, the activist literature isn't anonymous, but it's difficult to trace because it does not properly identify the Political Action Committee paying for it or list its mailing addresses, both of which are required by law. The group is violating the campaign law. Both were oversights, said Freeman, a former city council member who lost re-election after warring with Williamson and is among those who have accused Williamson of violating the campaign laws. These are the people who are constantly complaining about Williams violating the campaign law. These allegations they made against him, he had been cleared of, but here they are doing the same thing. Talk about duplicitousness. This is the ultimate in it. So this is what's going on in these campaigns. Now here's the other thing. Scott Kincaid, who's a friend of mine, and I like him, but you know he's the councilman from the 9th Ward on the city council, and he's a bitter enemy of Williamson. And he had a press conference a week ago in which he intentionally, in my opinion, distorted the truth. Obviously intended to hurt Williamson's campaign for re-election. You know, that's the only way it can be. All these people are doing that. These 5 council people. Now, one of the bedrocks of the Williamson's campaign is his success in putting the city on the road to recovery, shedding the shackles of the financial disaster that was facing Flint before he took office. You know, actually, you may remember it is 2 years since he took office, and he took control of the mayor's office. He's been able to show a surplus in the city budget over those 2 years, added together over $10–12 million. You remember, his first 2 years of his term, he was not involved in the city's direction because it was run by the financial director, Ed Kurtz. Williams took over officially in July, I think it was July 2005. Now, this political plus was helping Williamson's campaign, obviously, for re-election. And his opponents really didn't know how to deal with it. He's accomplished this. He's been given credit for this. So in an effort to disparage Williamson's political advantage of helping the city get back on a financial track, Kincaid and his 4 other obstructionists on the city council had this phony committee meeting called where he and the other 4 gave the impression, why, they were surprised because they asked for an update on the condition of the city in regard to its budget. And it showed at that time a $13 million deficit in this year's budget. And here's the confrontation between Kincaid on this issue and Joe Conroy, who was representing the mayor's office, explaining what this was all about. Can you play that, please?
Deficit since the state takeover 5 years ago. New figures released yesterday to City Council show there's no surplus at all. Instead, the city is facing a $13 million deficit. But Mayor Don Williamson's administration says their numbers tell a much different story. ABC 12's BC O'Leary joining us live in the studio now with details. BC?
Angie, the numbers released Wednesday by the city's accounting firm took many council members by surprise. Some say the city is clearly in crisis. The mayor's administration says that simply isn't the case.
The bottom line is these numbers don't lie.
They are preliminary financial results that some Flint City Council members say cast a frightening light on the state of the budget. Accounting firm Plant Moran reveals to council a budget deficit of over $13 million for the 2006-2007 fiscal year.
Well, revenue's not coming in as the mayor's projected, which is what happened in 99 and 2000. The revenue wasn't there.
But these are not the final numbers. Auditors say the city can expect anywhere between $3.5 to $5 million in additional state revenue and other funds. But that's raising concerns among council members.
There's not going to be enough revenue with the fund balance to cover the deficit to make the payments.
Those numbers were bandied about last night as money that we don't have. It's technically true, but it's not actually the case.
The administration says the numbers are misleading and don't take into account revenue that is expected to arrive. Conroy says there is no deficit. In fact, he says there is a surplus of over $4 million. But there will be more tightening of the budget for the current fiscal year.
In the long term, we've got a real fight to make, and that's why we're working so hard on investing in economic development, so this mayor can lead this city out.
As we've said, there are still quite a few decisions to be made on the current budget. The final numbers on the past fiscal year won't come until December's audit. In the studio, BC O'Malley, ABC.
Now, you have to understand this. The report by Channel 12 was clearly misleading and I think intentionally distorted, because those people are trying to help their friend who works with them over at Channel 12, Neely, Councilman Neely, is running for mayor. And I don't mind them helping, but they ought not to distort the facts on it. You see, the unfairness of the anti-Williamson 5 council members picking up the allegations of a deficit, $13 million, they say, with 6 months before the year is over, is their knowledge that these figures do not tell the real story of what the condition of the city budget is in at this time. And we don't know what the city budget will show at the end of the year. What Kincaid and the other 4 council people didn't tell you is that the day after the budget shows this deficit, it could very well show a surplus. And you ask, well, how could this happen? It's a simple thing. Because the money, a lot of the money that is shown in the deficit has been money advanced to the federal government for projects they want the city to provide, and they're going to pay the money back. They pay it back usually at the end of the year. And these are projects that the federal government previously approved and will repay the city before the budget year ends on December 31st. This happens every year. Last year, the budget at this time was $5 million showing a deficit at this time. And they end up with a $6 or $7 million surplus because the money that the federal government owed came in near the end of the year. And they all know this. Also, taxes that are due and owing that have not been received by the city yet are shown as part of the deficit. This occurs every year, until the city is paid back or until it receives the taxes which are coming in at different amounts every week. What's so disturbing about the allegations of the deficit is the council people were told at this hoax committee meeting the night before by this council's own accountant that these deficit figures could be very likely distorted for the reasons I've mentioned. Money advanced to the city, by the city to fund state and federal projects that will be repaid by the feds and the states before the end of the year. It's shown as part of the deficit. Now here's the video of the council's own accountant making this point at this committee meeting, which Kincaid and his cohorts conveniently forgot to mention when talking to the press the next day. Can you play that, please?
The departments and funds have deficit, some of them somewhat significant. And I know this has not obviously been audited, but this is a report that comes from our finance director, and I just wanted to ask you about what those things mean to us from a financial perspective. I mean, basically what I want you to do is just take a look at it And, if you need more time, that's fine as well, but some of the things send some pretty strong signals to me of something to be concerned about. If you want to take a look at that for a minute, that's no problem.
No, I can wing it. Obviously, what we've got here is this is a monthly budget to actual. It's through June 30th, 2007, so it's going to be posted as of June 30, 2007. Now, invariably, with any large unit, there's a number of adjustments, some accruals, and other tweaking of the records that may occur after the actual fiscal date, June 30th. When that day actually passes by, there's usually fair amount of additional adjustments and tweaking of the financial records that need to be made, accruing some items, payables, receivables, probably some state revenue sharing that might not be made and might not be accrued yet. So I preference my comments for that. First off, these are obviously not going to be the same numbers you see or we see when the annual audit gets started sometime early in October. But if you look at this from a general fund perspective on the very first page, what is rather...
So you see, they were told that there are other accruals coming in, state revenue funds, all kinds of grant money that is not in yet, that the city has advanced, that show the deficit's still owing. And they know that. Their accountant told them that. I've said time and again, I'm not particularly fond of Williamson. But I try not to allow my negative feelings about him to influence my analysis of his performance as mayor. And why I point this out now is I think you should know about Williamson's opponents and what they're doing. And the unfortunate part is they're misleading the public. Williamson's, the anti-Williamson council members, the 5 of them, would have much more credibility with the public if they were less personal in their attacks on Williamson's performances and did not allow their recrimination or dislike to run away with their better judgment on what's in the best interest of the citizens. Let me give you a couple of examples. We mentioned this before, but quickly, just to remind you. We have the possibility of losing $10, $15 million of federal funds because these 5 council members refused to approve the mayor's resolution to accept the funds for building demolition of condemned and boarded up houses, street broadening for the cultural center area that borders the cultural center area, the 3rd Avenue beautification project to connect the University of Michigan and the Kettering University. And the problem here with the reasoning on this, there's no local matching funds needed. This money is like a gift. And keep in mind, this money we're talking about is state and federal monies. These are taxes we've already paid to the federal and the state government. They want to give back to us. And these 5 council people voted against it. For no other reason because Williamson proposed it. There was no concern about the public's interest in this. Remember the Greenview Manor renovation program? Millions of federal dollars was set aside for that, and the Fed said, we want you to spend this money. If you don't, you're going to lose it. And it's their money. They wanted to renovate this apartment complex so they could get these people off the streets and out of abandoned or condemned homes with no running water. But Neely and Sams, Councilwoman Sams, prevented the resolution from passing, and they held it up for over a year and a half. Again, no matching funds were needed. This matter ultimately was okay because Neely and Sims and the other three got a lot of heat from their constituencies when we pointed this out on this program. So they finally approved it the next week. The common denominator running through this with these candidates, who are all supported by these 5 council people, one of the other candidates, and they're all part of this distortion here. The common denominator is they all dislike Williamson, and they're all trying to help Williamson's opponents, and they're hurting the public. They're wasting their money. You know, because if it's not accepted, these millions of dollars that are there waiting for us to take for knocking down condemned houses and fixing up the streets and renovating condos and apartments that could be used for people who are now living in the streets. All this money could be wasted, and what will happen is, if it's not used, it goes back to the federal government, who distributes to other communities. And it's our money, our tax money. You know, there's some legitimate issues that I can't understand why I haven't been brought up in this campaign against Williamson. You know, the refusal for him for his refusal to pay the citizens for their flooded basements. Remember that? Dean Yotis and Tom Pabst tried to get them to settle this case. This has been going on for 8 years. These people's basements were flooded during the Stanley administration. He refused to pay. Kurtz refused to pay. There was a summary disposition granted by the courts that say you are liable, city. Sit down with them and try to make some kind of a deal. And these people wanted to make a deal. They wanted the money so they could get their basements fixed, their houses fixed. Their houses were permeated with the terrible odor of sewage that the city is liable for if that happens. Williamson says, I'm not paying. So they had to sue him. Instead of costing maybe $1 million for the settlement of all the people, it's going to cost them $6 or $7 million. And they're now appealing to the Court of Appeals. And the clock is running. They get 7% income on that money as they wait for the Court of Appeals to decide, and they'll decide in favor of these people. It's already been up once and came back on another issue that the Court of Appeals decided that these people were entitled to their money. Now, that's a legitimate issue, it seems to me, to take Williamson on. It's costing millions of dollars of taxpayers' money because of this. Because he's obstinate. He doesn't want to pay it. His point is, why didn't Stanley pay it? Why didn't Kurtz pay it? Well, the mere fact that these were idiots for not paying it and costing them, why does he have to be? He could have looked like a hero by saying, hey, I'm paying it. These are my constituents. They're entitled to the money. I'll sit down and we'll work something out. He didn't do that. That's a legitimate issue. Why didn't he do it? You know, the lack of a reliable ambulance service for the city is another legitimate issue. People are dying unnecessarily because we don't have a good ambulance service in the city of Flint. And the city receives almost $1 million from the paramedic millage to have an ambulance service. I don't know what they do with the money. And you know, as far as crime is concerned, we need to go back to the foot patrol. It's been proven successful wherever it's implemented throughout the United States. Successful. It was successful here. Ever since we got rid of the foot patrol, and this has happened all over the country. All the foot patrols lost their funding from the Bush administration, and they lost the officers. They couldn't pay for it locally. But every community where that's happened, the crime rate's gone up. Gone up in Flint, too. Those are legitimate issues. Why don't we reintroduce the foot patrol? Anyway, here's another incident that happened here. Let me see if I can find it. That points out what I'm talking about here. Kind of the duplicitousness of these people on the city council. There's an article in the paper this past Friday, on August 3rd. It says, emergency spending irks councilman. Jim Ananick, who's the councilman, I think, from the 7th Ward, whom I know and like, and I think he has ability, and I think has good sense. But he's tied himself to these other four bitter anti-Williamson people. And my only thought is really what he needs to do is he needs to break away and be an independent person and support the things he knows he should support, and not just vote blindly with these other four because they want to do it that way. For example, the money that we have coming, millions of dollars that they turned down. They wouldn't pass the resolution, Williamson's resolution, to take the money, which is the way you have to get it. If there's no resolution passed, you lose the money. They refused to pass it. Jim Ananick should have been on the side of accepting the money, and it would have been 5-4 to accept it instead of 5-4 against it. And I know, like I say, I know Jim Ananick. His dad was an outstanding public official here for many years, an outstanding citizen. And I've known Jim Ananick for 30 years before he passed away too young, about 7, 8 years ago. Nicest guy, absolutely committed to the city. One of the best ombudsmen. He was the first one that became ombudsman after the new city charter was passed in the early 70s. Great guy. We worked together in the prosecutor's office. So I've known young Jim since he was born. I mean, I knew the day he was born because his dad and I were that good of friends. And Jim Ananick comes from good stock. And I wish he'd exert that independence I know that he had and his dad had. He's a very bright kid. I say kid, he's in his 30s, but I think of him as a young man. He is a young man. But he gets involved in this thing. The emergency spending irks councilman. And what happens is, Ananick says he will not take his paycheck any longer, and I had that someplace. I think his term is, and we'll show you the tape in a minute here, from now until the adoption of the legal budget, I will no longer accept my paycheck. And that's a bone of contention, you see. The mayor says he does have a legal budget, and what he did in line item vetoes, he can do under the charter, he says. And he's got opinions from lawyers that say he can do that. The city council says, no, he can't do that. And they want to go to court with it. So you have legitimate issues here. But anyway, the direction of the council, the anti-Williamson people, is to try to do anything to disrupt Williamson's campaign, whether it's promoting the fact that he got the city in the black again after many years of being in the red, whatever it might be. His constant support of the police chief, whatever. But anyway, Jim Ananick says he's not going to take his money anymore. And he makes these comments. Can you play that tape for me, please?
To explain this unusual action, Kathy.
Larry City Council Finance Chair Jim Ananick says his complaints about the way Mayor Williamson is spending city dollars have been falling on deaf ears for weeks. So today, he announced a new plan of protest, saying he's putting his money where his mouth is, literally.
From now until the adoption of the legal budget, I will no longer accept my salary.
Ananick has been arguing for the past month that there is no legal budget in place. He claims the mayor's budget was never legally approved by council. But he says documents he's accumulated over the past few days have given him even greater concerns about the city's finances. He says the documents show that the mayor has approved more than 100 emergency purchases in the past month, purchases that have totaled more than $5 million in some 30 days, and Ananick questions the emergency nature of many of them. After seeing the total, Ananick said he could no longer be complicit by accepting a paycheck from a budget he does not believe legally exists.
The overspending that we've seen the last 2 years and the emergency purchases send a strong message to the state saying that we're being fiscally irresponsible again, and I don't want to be complicit with that. I'm sending a message to the community that this needs to stop. This type of arrogant behavior needs to stop, and I'm trying to take a stand so that people, we need a little outrage in this community, and I'm hoping that helps trigger that.
Ananick says his goal is to negotiate with the mayor's office and try to come up with a different type of budgeting that would include more checks and balances between the two. If nothing changes, he predicts council will likely end up in court, charging the mayor with violating city charter by adopting an illegal budget. The mayor's budget director telling us only that there is a legal budget in place. He says it is a functioning one because people are cashing their checks. Live in the newsroom, Kathy Schaff.
Now keep in mind, in the budget, the mayor must go before the council when he wants to expend any amounts of money. If it's not an emergency, he has to go and get their approval. They refuse to approve anything. So things become an emergency. And let me just quickly tell you what this $5 million covers. And these are things that went to the council under the regular routine way of resolutions to spend, it's been turned down. So now you've got a situation where there is an emergency because you have to have, for example, water quality tests, money for that, fees to the state of Michigan, water quality, various chemicals for sewer and treatment, pump repairs and gauges, piping parts, circuit boards for water filters, laboratory chemicals, fees and services. The option of this, if you don't have it, you dump the raw sewage into the Front River. That can't happen. This is some of the emergency things. Some of the things they tried to get in the regular budget approved by these 5 council people, they turned them down. Now they become emergency. Otherwise, you have to close the water and sewer plant down. So it is an emergency. And then here's some of the other things. Fire truck repairs and replacement tires, safety vests, safety glasses, rain suit, gloves, respirators, firefighting boots, hearing protectors, sanitizers, cleaners, first aid equipment, helmets, emergency vehicles, lighting repair parts. In the police, it's money due for the state fingerprint system, which if you don't belong, if you got fingerprints, they're not going to tell you if they're involved in the state. You have to be part of it. Training fees for new police recruits. Here's these guys that want more police officers, so the mayor asks for money in the regular budget and goes up with a resolution for fees for new police recruits. It's turned down. So he has to have the money for the recruits in order to get them on the streets. So he decides it's an emergency and authorizes the money under the emergency fund. He doesn't go. He didn't go the second time before the board because they turned him down the first time. And then you have repair parts for excavators, street sweeper repair parts, traffic sign posts, traffic lights repair parts, grates and frames for catch basin repairs, traffic cones and barricades, lawnmowers, tractors repair parts, backhoe maintenance, sand, gravel. In fact, some of this stuff, they had contracts with gravel companies, blacktop companies for a number of years, and they got good buys a couple of years ago, and they signed contracts for 3 or 4 years ahead at that price, and they won't give them the money for it now. So the mayor decides, he calls an emergency, authorize the payment to these things to save the money. So there is, that's what he's claiming there is no emergency on. And then keep in mind, as I said, most of this stuff has to do with the campaign. These 5 council people have their favorite, people. Neely has Sims and Poplar, and Kincaid's supporting one guy. Jim Ennick supporting this Walling. No kidding. Here's the campaign disclosures by Dwayne Walling that shows almost $3,000 paid to name of the company is it's a campaign strategy group. It's a corporation, and the agent and the person that runs this is Jim Ennick. It's his company. And Walling is his client. And they're now trying to embarrass the mayor with this claim that he's going to give the check back, or he's not going to cash it. He's not going to give it back. He's not going to cash it. Although he's cashed 2 other ones, which I think he should do anyway. He should cash this one. But see, the distortion here and the duplicitousness here is that these 5 council people are taking their checks out of the 2008 budget they say does not exist. They've taken money for the clerk's office, the city clerk's office, which needs help and does a good job and really should be funded. And they take the money from the 2008 budget to do that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but they won't allow Williamson to spend any of the money out of the 2008 budget that he needs it for. But they'll spend it. They haven't given their checks back. So, the whole thing is really kind of phony. All of this is gamesmanship on this election. And what I'm saying is that I think under these circumstances, when this effort is made by Jim Ennick to suggest that the mayor is violating the budget or the charter by setting these things out as emergencies, which I think indicate clearly to you that they are emergencies if they turn them down in the regular course of business. You can't close down the water and sewer plant, can't close down the fire department and the police department, and that's what these emergency expenditures were for. And I think that the public should know that when Ennick takes on the mayor in this way, he is being paid as a consultant by one of Williams's opponents in this election. Now, as I say, Jim Ennick can be a star down there. I really believe in this guy. But he's allowing these other 4 people to give him too much direction. And he ought to become more independent. And when things like all these $1 million of money or dollars of federal and state funds are being handed to us, he's got to vote to take it, even if he has to vote with the 4 people that are supporters of Williamson, if that's the best thing to do. Well, anyway, let's go on here. I think it was about 6 weeks ago, Charles Abbey attorney made a motion to set aside the former City of Burton's Public Works Director's bribery and extortion conviction, you might remember it, by a federal district court jury. Well, you know, we told you at that time this conviction would stand in Abbey's efforts to get the judge to free him, to set him free, would be futile, because the district judge had not committed any reversible error. We told you then that the order of the court to overturn a jury's verdict of guilty, if there was error, and I don't think there was any error here, has to be, the error must be such that if it was not allowed, if it was not permitted in the trial itself, it would have caused an acquittal. And because it was allowed in, it caused the conviction. Now you have to make that determination that it was more than harmless error. In this case, the court this week decided what we suggested he decide. There was no error. If there was any error, it was harmless error, but there was no indication that there was error in the first place. And the point I'm making, even if there was error, if it didn't affect the judgment of the court or the jury, and there was sufficient evidence other than the alleged error to justify the conviction, then the conviction stands. There was substantial evidence to support the conviction. Now, here's what Abbey's looking at. He's looking at possibly 3 years, near 3 years in prison. And the only way he could probably cut that down substantially is if he'd tell the truth and cooperate with the federal investigation. I'm not so sure that is going to happen, but if it doesn't, while he's sitting in prison, Smiley and his cohorts that he knows a lot about will be sitting on their porches each summer and spring while he's in jail, sipping their mint juleps and enjoying their children and their grandchildren. But anyway, let me quickly go on. But it would be interesting to watch this Abbey case. He's sentenced, I think, the 14th of this month, which is next week sometime. And it'll be interesting to see what the sentence is. Now, if there's another adjournment, that might indicate that he might be talking to him and the feds are checking out what he's saying and they need more time, and often that's what happens with adjournments. But if there is no adjournment, I think, Godola is very well known that when it comes to public corruption, he's a heavy, heavy sentencer, and we'll see what happens here. We're getting close to our time, but I do want to mention a couple of things here. For weeks now, we've been telling you about the misuse of taxpayers' money by the Career Alliance. They are the primarily supported, tax-supported organization that receive more than $20 million a year in Flint, Genesee County and Shiawassee County, from the state and federal government to assist unemployed and low-income people find jobs and train and retrain workers for new jobs. We told you how the alleged ripoff of the taxpayers' money first became public because of the tenacity of the Flint Journal's investigative reporter Ron Fonger when he was investigating into rumors that had reached him concerning the possible wrongdoing by the Career Alliance staff people and the misuse of Career Alliance credit cards, overpaying certain high staff personnel, and clear conflicts of interest with Career Alliance Board of Directors. We also told you there was mounting evidence that some criminal wrongdoing was going on, and a federal criminal investigation had already been started, and so is still going. On our program weeks ago, we also told you that we felt that the ex-director of the Career Alliance, Pam Loving, and other high Career Alliance officials would be let go, and there was new evidence indicating that the Career Alliance was expending taxpayers' money for unnecessary projects where allegedly family members of staff members were benefiting. We also told you on this program that another agency associated with Career Alliance training program may have misspent $100,000 of taxpayers' dollars in a scam that was so brazen that they couldn't hide it in their own audit, and it came up in their own audit. Also, the state audit now indicates that over $1.25 million of Career Alliance money was spent with organizations that at least 5 Career Alliance board members have interests. I think a clear conflict. Could this be why the board of directors ignored all these telltale signs that are out there? Can you play that tape, please, for me?
Makes more than Governor Granholm, but now she's being criticized for her organization's lack of, organization. Pamela Loving heads Career Alliance, which handles jobs training for Genesee and Shiawassee counties. The director of Michigan's Department of Labor says he has growing concerns over that organization's condition. Keith Cooley says organization has persisting problems that seem to be structural in nature. Loving has also been taking heat over her $170,000 salary.
No matter.
Well, anyway, incidentally, that date on Abby's hearing or sentencing is, I think, August 15th, not the 17th. So anyway, but Ron Fonger dug all this up and really should get a lot of credit for it. You might remember the auditor questions job unit. That's the story. Career Alliance may toss its plastic, meaning its credit cards. Career CEO of salary gets $177,000, more like $200,000 with bonuses and everything involved. Highest paid public official in the county. Labor chief and the state labor chief blast job unit. Career Alliance probe deepens. Another training agency that is the one I was telling you about, $100,000 deal there. Job CEO put on leave. They finally got rid of her. Pam Loving. Workforce chairman acknowledges serious issues. Now he's acknowledged the serious issues. Career Alliance worries county. Now the county board is into it because they make the appointments or some of the appointments on the board. Now finally job agency board admits it lost control of Career Alliance. And then it goes on here, and the last one was this, it was actually today where it says agency state address conflict issue. And we have here, let me go this one. Let me see how my time is. It talks about the conflict of interest. And here's Zelli, who is Mike Zelli. He's the nicest guy in the world, incidentally. He's with the Disabilities Network. He's chairman of the board, said that the Workforce Development Board knew about the arrangement, adding that the U.S. Department of Labor encouraged the joint grant application. And he says, I don't feel it's a problem. He's talking about the conflict. There is no conflict, he says. Now the state, here's what the state said. The state, in a letter to the agency, had asked Career Alliance to clarify the relationship between board members, including Zelli, and organizations not represented. Not voting on some of the contracts might not be enough. That's what these 5 people say they do. They don't vote on their contract. According to the state, it was said in a May letter that if an agency represented on the workforce board is awarded a contract, the member must immediately resign to avoid the conflict or the appearance of conflict. That clearly contradicts what Zelli is saying here. And it would seem to me, I'm just trying to find that quote here. It says this, that it says, Zelli said ties between the Workforce Development Board members and the Career Alliance don't amount to a conflict of interest, but said a policy will be strengthened to avoid even the appearance of conflict. How do you do that? He's saying, even though we're on the board and our organizations we represent are dealing with Career Alliance and getting money, how do you deal with that? I mean, it seems to me that these people that have control of the economic well-being of these Career Alliance staff people who make the decision on where the money is going to go, the implications are that there is a conflict, and that these people on that board control the very well-being of the staff people. And if the staff people, I think, are sitting there thinking, boy, if we don't give them money, they may cut our salaries, they may not increase it, who knows? And I'm not sure they would do that, but it's the appearance of the conflict that we're talking about here. And they, obviously, the board doesn't see it. I say what you have to do is you got to eliminate this board and start all over with new members, and make sure none of them have any relationship with any organizations that would be dealing with Career Alliance and receiving money from Career Alliance. Apparently that's not going to change, and to me that's the biggest thing right now, the conflict of interest, and they either don't see it or don't care. And like I say, these members on this board are good people. I don't have any problem with them. I just feel that they should agree there is a conflict and make sure their organizations do not receive any more monies from Career Alliance. Whether they vote on it or not, they have the power to directly influence the very economic well-being of these people on that staff, and that indicates there could be some conflict there. But anyway, our time is up. We had a number of other things we wanted to talk about. But today is election day. Stay up tonight. You'll see who won the election. As I say, I tell you these things even after the election simply because you should know about these people, whether it's Williamson or whether it's his opponents. They all have an axe to grind, and you should know what the axe is, and you should know where they're coming from. We'll see you next week. In the meantime, we'll be at the White Horse.